Thank you very much, Bryan Walsh, and thank you to the organizers for setting up such a great venue. It's always very, very fascinating to be able to talk not only to industry representatives in your own sector, but to have the opportunity for cross-sectoral discussions too. Because what we are increasingly seeing is an interrelations between the different industrial sectors. Coming from the energy industry, I also used to work for utilities, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, the New York Power Authority. I'm increasingly cognizant of what it means to provide energy, to provide reliable power, to provide low-cost power as a service, and the obligation that utilities and energy companies face to provide that energy to the 2 billion people that have no electricity right now in an efficient manner and reducing greenhouse gases at the meantime as well. So it's an awesome obligation that cuts across sectors. Energy is connected to the building sector, energy is connected to the agricultural sector. 39% of freshwater reserves are used by the energy industry, which is, again, a task that we have to focus on and figure out how we can manage. Energy is interrelated to telecommunications. Smart grids are becoming increasingly important in how you transport energy, how you set up microgrids, and how you set up your energy systems. So that is an interplay that's coming in as well. And we see that we need to be coordinating to provide not only the resources for this new energy future that we're all going to be facing, but also to provide the labor, the adequate training, and the people that have the ability to function cross-sectorally. And that is an awesome task. We see the shift to the new energy future actually by introducing more cleaner technologies as a benefit. Even the representative of the UN to Mexico said that if you put the right incentives and if you put the right mechanisms in place, those industries can create jobs. They can shift us away from this economic slump that we're facing right now. In Europe, what you're seeing is, and I'm quoting her, is yesterday, is that the solar and the wind industry now employ more people than the automobile industry and the steel industry. Also in Germany, we're seeing that solar and wind employ more people than the traditional coal industry. So this is a job maker. And if we're focused on implementing the right policy mechanisms, we can have a smooth transition to that future, and that's what our group focused on. Now, I'll have to say we had a wonderful group. We had a good cross-section of people from the industry, people from the economic backgrounds and the financial community, people that are generators, and people that provide technologies. And we also focused on the 3 questions that were asked by this conference, and the answers are as follows. What can Cancun deliver to help the sector step up its commitments? Across the board, I absolutely agree that we need transparency. We need to have accountability, we need to have monitoring, we need to have reporting, and we need to have very clear targets that are universal. This is an industry that is used to doing this. We've got universal safety standards, we've got universal electricity standards, we know how to do it, we should be able to set it up. We also felt that we needed to have opportunities for technology transfer and the uniform standards, and that industry leaders should be rewarded. Right now, we have a lot of people on the cutting edge and not the right rewards in place. We also felt that, and that was a comment from the countries that are in transition and the developing countries, that they didn't have adequate access to information in terms of the latest technology as well as the latest policy mechanisms. We felt that there needed to be a body established that is kind of a clearinghouse for the frameworks in terms of policies that work, policies that could be implemented, as well as best-of-the-art and state-of-the-art technologies and access to those technologies. The group also recommended that as part of putting a price on climate change and carbon emissions, which should encompass all emissions, and that we should try to make our best effort to internalize external costs and the environmental externalities in how we price energy and electricity. The specific policy instruments that nations can employ, we felt that Cancun can call for a larger framework and for the master plans, and then how the nations implement them specifically is going to be very much on a case-by-case basis. We felt that each country needs to have a mechanism that rewards the shift away from the fossil-based traditional energies. That you need to have regulations, which are pretty universal, that are actually able to be helpful in the industry when it transitions to these technologies, recognizing that this industry is made out of numerous players, not only the government-owned utilities, not only the state monopolies, but as well as a lot of independent power producers, and typically they're the ones that bring the new technologies and the transition to renewables. We wanted the whole infrastructure to send a signal to shift away from the legacy of the fossil fuel And so that you would have an infrastructure that kind of mirrors a little bit what the telecommunication industry did, which is shift away from the wires and connect it to the wires and move more to distributed, much smaller and much more efficient energy systems, sort of the wireless electricity future age. We wanted an equal access to the grid. A lot of times renewables don't have equal access to the grid, and that is very important. There are a lot of bureaucratic and administrative barriers that are there. And incentives that capture not only the emissions, the technologies that capture emissions, but also technologies that provide storage as well as other cutting-edge solutions that are going to be necessary for the energy of the future. We also felt that the financial community needed to receive the right signals. As Bryan Walsh mentioned, we've got a huge problem with the financial community feeling extremely insecure when it comes to renewables. There are incentives, there are packages, there are feed-in tariffs. We've got a myriad of policies that are in place. But what we see as a common thread that you need in order for the financial community to feel secure is a long-term commitment to the program. If the financing is secure and you know that you're going to have the rate of returns and you know that this policy is in place for the long term, the financial community commits, and it commits in to a very, very large extent. What we're seeing in California is very much a knee-jerk reaction. You have policies that have to be implemented every year or every 2 to 3 years. There's financial insecurity. There's a difficulty to finance a renewable energy project when you're trying to compete with traditional power and you're financing it with venture capital. So we need to have access to financing for these renewable projects, and also we need to send the right signal to the international community. A lot of the microfinancing that is necessary for the smaller distributed energy projects are not there. Grameen Shanti is a great bank that's doing it, but what we see happening with large banks is they much prefer to fund a central power station as opposed to hundreds of smaller ones. So we need to have a shift of that, and we need to have a concentrated policy on financing. We also felt that it was necessary to step up the commitment to the education and to the communications. We like the sticks and the carrots approach, but we also feel, and I'm quoting Arab Al-Bala here, we need to have the tambourine. We need to be telling people what's going on, why it's happening, and that needs to be recognized. Now, we were inspired to a certain extent to what Al Gore said yesterday, and having lofty goals and having ambitions and having vision. Our group also, as a group, said that we should be ambitious in the goals that we set. And we know what the technologies are, we know what's available, we know that we can reach 20 and 30% of renewable energy on the grid right now, even in the transportation sector in terms of fuels. And we know that we need some technological breakthroughs to go further, but we felt we needed to have a lofty goal for Cancun and that we needed to have an ambitious target in order to be able to have success in the future. So I'm going to read what our statement was in terms of what our commitment as a group to Cancun is. The discussion group representatives are in agreement that the technologies needed to achieve 100% renewable energy systems are largely available today. What is necessary to achieve this goal is a widespread, concentrated, and well-supported effort based on a comprehensive set of policy frameworks, targeted financing, as well as technology development and transfer mechanisms that will make the 100% renewable energy solution a reality by 2050. So we came up with a call to action to Cancun to have a 100% renewable energy system by 2050, and we felt that was achievable if we have the right frameworks in place.
Thank you, Angelina. I mean, clearly we're not going to make the gigantic changes you need to see happen in energy above all unless you really shoot for the stars, so thank you very much for that. Next we have, to Bryan's right, we have John Kornerup Bong, who is the the coordinator for the transportation and logistics sector. He is the director of corporate sustainability at AP Moeller-Maersk, and which is obviously one of the world's largest shipping companies. And he's also a veteran of the World Wildlife Fund. John?
Thank you. I would like to start my presentation by thanking actually the participants in the working group. I think we had a very active group of people with a lot of good discussions. So thank you. I can't see you from here, but thank you to all of you for your contributions. Before going to what we managed to come up with, I would just start with a remark that echoes a little bit what Bryan said for the food and agriculture sector. In some sense, of course, we were a common sector in the sense that we kind of provide the same service. We move either stuff or people. But when it comes to looking at the climate change negotiations, we're not really a sector. We have shipping, aviation, they're dealt with very separately, and then we have people's transport in different forms. So we stumbled into that difficulties as well in terms of getting down to very concrete recommendations, both for policymakers, but also in terms of our own commitments. And it is like it is with food and beverage and agriculture. We do not work a lot across those subsectors, or whatever you want to call it. So there is not a lot of work to see what can the sector, in terms of transport, do as a whole. A lot of what can be done, of course, would then, with big impact, would then also, of course, be related to modal shifts, and obviously there's a big competition issue within that. Actually, this is my own reflection. It might actually be interesting to make another time making an exercise where transport is just seen as an enabler, delivering other services like housing or food or whatever, because we are also very much operating as a response to what is needed in other sectors to provide services to society. But that was just a reflection. We did manage to come up with points responding to all three questions. Actually, we had a great deal of convergence. Of course, that's easier if you do not go down to very concrete commitments and numbers. But the convergence was also about which kind of issue we should put in the statement. So I think that in itself is a signal. We made rather short, one or two liners as responses. So I'm going to go through them now. So from the Transportation and Logistics Group, our answers were as follows. What can Cancun deliver to help the sector step up its commitment? And we were asking for international negotiations on combating climate change should provide a frame for global reduction targets that are technology neutral and that creates a level playing field. We were not able, of course, to be more specific because we are in the situation that, for example, on the shipping side, the actual negotiation and target setting goes on in the IMO, and that's how the sector perceive it to be most efficient. I think keywords here that everybody agreed on was technology neutrality, in the sense that we would like policymakers to create frames around the economy, the services of moving people and goods, and then let the competition show how that can be done most efficiently. The level playing field is important, I think, for everybody, but especially also, of course, in the shipping industry, which is a truly global industry where you can easily swap from one country to another. So the importance of a global level playing field. Then another thing that came up, and where there was actually totally agreement in the group, was to ask for the policymakers would adopt one global standard for measurement of greenhouse gas emissions from companies. It's a methodology issue, and some might consider it not that high level, but there is a lot of different methodologies and ways of measuring out there, and it is obscuring transparency. So we came up with that in the context of the UNFCCC negotiations, all the countries could actually sign up to one standard for accounting. And then I think, echoing what we have heard throughout this conference, the focus on solutions, the shift that seems to be happening at a big scale right now to accommodate or add to the focus on companies as emitters, a focus on companies as solution providers, and especially solutions that matters at scale, was something that we agreed on to have in there. We didn't have time to elaborate on that. What would it mean in more concrete terms? But we have it up as a bullet point and something that we think we would signal was important.